It was a quiet, chilly morning in the small town of Ridgewood, Alabama. The sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. FBI Captain Marcus Johnson adjusted his tie as he stepped out of his black sedan. He glanced around at the sleepy little town where nothing seemed out of place, but appearances could be deceiving, and Marcus knew it better than anyone. Marcus had been sent to Ridgewood to investigate a series of bank robberies that had left the entire region on edge. What made these crimes unusual wasn't just their frequency. It was the fact that they appeared to involve members of local law enforcement. It was a delicate situation, one that required tact and precision. As a seasoned investigator with years of experience under his belt, Marcus felt confident he could handle whatever came his way. Little did he know how wrong he would soon be. The Ridgewood Police Department was located in a modest brick building near the center of town. Outside, an old wooden sign read, "Ridgewood PD, protecting our community since 1892. The words sounded noble, but Marcus couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine as he walked through the front doors. Inside, the station was dimly lit, with peeling paint on the walls and faded posters about community safety hanging crookedly. A few officers sat slouched in chairs, sipping coffee and chatting idly. None of them looked particularly busy or particularly welcoming. At the front desk, a young woman with tired eyes greeted Marcus hesitantly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Captain Marcus Johnson," he replied, flashing his badge. "FBI, I'm here to speak with Sheriff Griggs." The woman's eyes widened slightly and she quickly picked up the phone to alert someone in the back. Moments later, a tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from a nearby office. This was Sheriff Dan Griggs, a figure who commanded attention simply by walking into a room. His grizzled face was lined with age, and his piercing blue eyes scanned Marcus from head to toe. There was no warmth in his gaze, only suspicion. "You must be the fella from the Bureau," Griggs said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "What brings the big city boys all the way down to our neck of the woods?" Marcus extended his hand politely, though he noticed Griggs hesitated before shaking it. "Good morning, Sheriff. We're looking into some recent incidents involving potential criminal activity tied to your department. I'm here to ask a few questions and review any relevant files." Griggs let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Criminal activity in my department? That's rich." He leaned back against the counter, folding his arms across his chest. "Listen, son, we've got everything under control here. No need for outsiders sticking their noses where they don't belong." Marcus kept his expression neutral, refusing to rise to the bait. "I understand your concerns, Sheriff, but this is standard procedure. My team has reason to believe there may be connections between certain individuals in your department and the recent string of bank robberies." Before Griggs could respond, a murmur rippled through the room. One of the deputies, a wiry man with a scruffy beard, snorted loudly. "Connections? You mean like how you city folks always think the worst of us country boys?" Another deputy chimed in, laughing cruelly. "Maybe if you spent less time profiling people and more time doing your job, you'd actually catch the real criminals." Marcus ignored the taunts, focusing instead on maintaining professionalism. But then something happened that caught him off guard. From the corner of the room, another deputy muttered a racial slur under his breath. Though it was soft, it carried enough weight to make everyone pause. Marcus turned toward the source of the comment, locking eyes with Deputy Cole, a burly man with tattoos snaking up his arms. Cole smirked, clearly unapologetic. For a moment, the air in the room grew thick with tension. Marcus felt the weight of every pair of eyes on him. Some were curious, others hostile, but none offered support. His heart pounded in his chest, but outwardly he remained calm. Taking a deep breath, he addressed the group directly. "Let me make one thing clear," Marcus said, his voice steady and firm. "I'm not here to judge anyone based on where they come from or what they look like. I'm here to do my job, to find answers and bring justice to those affected by these crimes. If anyone has a problem with that, they're welcome to take it up with my superiors." His words hung in the air, met with silence. For a brief second, it seemed like the tension might ease. But then Griggs spoke again, his voice sharp and dismissive. "All right, enough of this nonsense, Captain Johnson. If you want to waste your time digging through our files, go ahead. But don't expect us to roll out the red carpet for you." With that, Griggs turned and strode back into his office, leaving Marcus standing awkwardly in the middle of the room. The other officers resumed their conversations, but now there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Whispers filled the space, and Marcus could feel the hostility radiating from nearly every direction. Determined not to let the situation derail his mission, Marcus requested access to the department's records. He was led to a cramped storage room filled with dusty file cabinets and stacks of papers. As he began sorting through the documents, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every so often, he'd glance up to see a pair of eyes peering at him through the doorway, only to disappear moments later. Hours passed, and Marcus uncovered little of substance. Many of the files were incomplete or missing entirely, raising more questions than answers. Frustrated but undeterred, he decided to pay a visit to some of the locations mentioned in the case reports. Perhaps the answers he sought weren't hidden in paperwork, but in plain sight. As Marcus prepared to leave the station, he was stopped by Deputy Cole, who loomed large in the doorway. "Where do you think you're going?" Cole demanded, his tone laced with menace. Marcus froze, his instincts screaming at him to tread carefully. "I'm heading out to check a few leads," Marcus replied evenly, keeping his hands visible. "Is there a problem?" Cole's lips curled into a sneer. "You bet there's a problem. You strut in here like you own the place, throwing around accusations and stirring up trouble. Well, let me tell you something. You're not wanted here." Marcus took a step back, his mind racing. He had faced dangerous situations before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about solving a case anymore. It was personal. And, as Cole reached for something tucked into his holster, Marcus realized that things were about to get much worse. As Deputy Cole stepped closer, his hand hovering dangerously near the grip of his holstered gun, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The room seemed to shrink around him, the air thick with tension. Every instinct screamed at Marcus to react, but he knew better than to escalate the situation further. Instead, he raised his hands slowly, palms facing outward in a gesture of calm. "Deputy Cole," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "There's no need for this. I'm just doing my job." Cole's sneer deepened. As he leaned in closer, his breath hot and heavy with contempt. "Your job?" he spat. "You think you can come into our town, insult us, and walk away like nothing happened? You don't belong here, Johnson." The other officers who had been milling about earlier now gathered around, forming a loose circle around Marcus and Cole. Some looked uneasy, shifting their weight from foot to foot, while others wore smirks that made Marcus's blood boil. He scanned the faces surrounding him, searching for any sign of reason or restraint, but found none. These men weren't going to intervene. They were content to let the situation play out however it would. Marcus took another slow step backward, trying to create some distance between himself and Cole. His mind raced, calculating his options. If Cole drew his weapon, Marcus knew he'd have only seconds to react, but pulling his own firearm could turn the situation deadly, and that was exactly what these men wanted. They were testing him, pushing him to see how far they could go before he snapped, and Marcus refused to give them the satisfaction. "You're right about one thing," Marcus replied, keeping his tone measured but firm. "I'm not from here, but that doesn't change the fact that crimes are being committed in this town, and I'm here to find out who's responsible. That includes anyone wearing a badge." His words hit a nerve. Cole's face twisted in anger, and without warning he yanked his gun from its holster. The sharp metallic click echoed through the room as he pointed the barrel directly at Marcus's chest. Time seemed to freeze. For a split second, Marcus thought he might actually die in this dingy little police station, miles away from home, all because of a hatred rooted in ignorance. "I warned you," Cole growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Know where to run now, boy. Maybe this'll teach you to stay in your lane." Marcus didn't flinch. He locked eyes with Cole, refusing to show fear even as his heart thundered in his chest. "If you pull that trigger, he said quietly. "You'll regret it for the rest of your life." "Is that really what you want?" The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Even the other deputies seemed taken aback by the intensity of the moment. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the entire world had stopped spinning, leaving only Marcus and Cole locked in a deadly standoff. Just when it seemed like Cole might actually fire, Sheriff Griggs appeared in the doorway. His face was red with fury, veins bulging in his neck as he bellowed, "What in God's name is going on here?" Cole hesitated, glancing over his shoulder at the sheriff. "This guy," he started, jabbing the gun toward Marcus. "He thinks he can waltz in here and accuse us of being criminals. I wasn't going to let him talk to me like that." Griggs stormed forward, grabbing Cole's arm and forcing the gun downward. "Put that damn thing away," he roared. "Are you trying to get us all killed?" For a moment, Cole resisted, his jaw clenched tight. But eventually, he relented, shoving the gun back into its holster with a muttered curse. Griggs turned to Marcus, his expression a mixture of anger and thinly veiled panic. "Captain Johnson," he said, his tone dripping with forced politeness, "I apologize for my deputy's behavior. He's passionate about protecting our community." Marcus stared at Griggs unimpressed. "Protecting it or controlling it?" He shot back, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've got bigger problems than a few bank robberies." Griggs stiffened, his lips curling into a snarl. "Watch yourself. Johnson, you may have a fancy title and a badge from Washington, but you're still outnumbered here, don't forget that." With that, Griggs grabbed Cole by the arm and dragged him into a nearby office, slamming the door shut behind them. The remaining officers lingered for a moment longer, glaring at Marcus before dispersing. The confrontation was over, for now, but the damage had been done. Marcus stood alone in the middle of the station, his body trembling with a mix of rage and relief. Later that evening, back at his hotel room, Marcus replayed the events of the day in his mind. The image of Cole pointing a gun at him haunted him, a stark reminder of how quickly things could spiral out of control. He poured himself a glass of water and sat down on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall. Despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger, a culture of corruption and racism that had festered unchecked for years. Determined to push forward, Marcus opened his laptop and began reviewing the notes he'd taken during his brief time at the station. Though the files had been incomplete, he'd managed to piece together a few key details. One name kept popping up repeatedly: Deputy Frank Miller. According to witness statements and surveillance footage, Miller had been spotted near several of the robbery locations shortly before or after the crimes occurred. It was circumstantial evidence at best, but it was enough to warrant further investigation. As Marcus dug deeper, he stumbled upon something even more troubling. A series of anonymous tips submitted to the FBI's hotline mentioned suspicious activity involving Ridgewood PD officers, including allegations of bribery, intimidation, and illegal trafficking. Someone in the community clearly wanted the truth to come out, but they were too afraid to speak up openly. Realizing he needed backup, Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a trusted colleague at FBI headquarters. "Hey, it's me," he said, when the call connected. "Listen, I need your help. Things here are worse than we thought. I'm talking systemic corruption, possible ties to organized crime. I need surveillance equipment, additional agents, and maybe even a protective detail. If things escalate further." On the other end of the line, his colleague sounded alarmed. "Marcus, are you sure you're safe? This sounds serious." "I'll be fine," Marcus assured him, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. "But I can't do this alone. Not anymore." After hanging up, Marcus spent the rest of the night poring over maps of the town, identifying potential meeting spots for the robbers and corrupt officers. He marked key locations on a digital map, planning his next moves carefully. Sleep eluded him, his mind racing with scenarios and strategies. By morning, he was exhausted but focused, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The following day, Marcus decided to pay a visit to one of the locations flagged in the anonymous tips, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. As he drove there, he noticed a black truck trailing him at a discreet distance. At first, he thought it might just be coincidence, but when the truck followed him even after he made several random turns, his suspicions grew. Whoever was behind the wheel clearly wanted to keep tabs on him. Undeterred, Marcus arrived at the warehouse and parked his car a safe distance away. He grabbed a pair of binoculars from the passenger seat and surveyed the area. The building was decrepit, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in graffiti. But there were signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt, discarded fast food wrappers, and a faint smell of gasoline lingering in the air. Cautiously, Marcus approached the entrance, his hand resting lightly on the grip of his sidearm. Inside, he found stacks of crates and boxes piled haphazardly against the walls. Among them were items that matched descriptions of stolen goods from the bank: robberies, electronics, jewelry, and cash bundles wrapped in plastic. It was clear that this place was being used as a storage facility for the stolen loot. As Marcus snapped photos and collected evidence, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. Someone else was inside. Heart pounding, he ducked behind a stack of crates and listened intently. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by low voices murmuring in conversation. "You think the feds know yet?" one voice asked nervously. "Nah," another replied dismissively. "Even if they do, they won't last long. Not in this town." Marcus recognized the second voice immediately. It belonged to Deputy Cole. His stomach churned with a mix of anger and determination. These men weren't just involved in petty theft. They were part of something far more sinister, and Marcus was determined to bring them down, no matter the cost. Peering around the corner, Marcus caught a glimpse of two figures moving deeper into the warehouse. Their badges gleamed faintly in the dim light, confirming his worst fears. This wasn't just a rogue officer or two. It was an entire network operating in plain sight. Taking a deep breath, Marcus slipped back outside and returned to his car. He had seen enough. Now it was time to act. With the evidence he'd gathered and the support of his colleagues on the way, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Marcus knew one thing for certain: justice was worth fighting for, even if it meant risking everything. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, his mind buzzing with plans. He knew he couldn't tackle this case alone anymore. The evidence he'd gathered from the warehouse was damning, but it wasn't enough to bring down an entire corrupt police department. He needed more proof, more witnesses, and most importantly, more allies. As he sipped his coffee, staring out the window of his hotel room, he made a mental checklist of what needed to be done. First on his list was reaching out to the FBI team that had promised him backup. True to their word, additional agents arrived in Ridgewood by midday. They set up a temporary command center in a nearby motel, equipping themselves with surveillance gear, encrypted communication devices, and even drones for aerial reconnaissance. Marcus briefed them thoroughly, sharing every detail of his investigation so far. The agents listened intently, nodding as they pieced together the puzzle Marcus had been working on for days. One of the agents, a tech specialist named Rachel, suggested using facial recognition software to analyze security footage from businesses near the robbery sites. If these officers are involved, chances are they've been caught on camera, she explained. We can cross-reference the images with employee records from the police department. Marcus nodded approvingly. Good idea. Let's start there. With Rachel leading the effort, the team began combing through hours of grainy video feeds, searching for anything suspicious. Meanwhile, Marcus focused on another critical piece of the puzzle: finding someone willing to speak up about the corruption plaguing Ridgewood PD. He remembered the anonymous tips he'd received earlier and decided to follow up on them. Using burner phones provided by the FBI, Marcus called the numbers listed in the reports. Most of the calls went unanswered, or were met with nervous silence. But one call stood out. A woman who identified herself only as Evelyn agreed to meet him under strict conditions. She insisted on speaking in person, somewhere private and away from prying eyes. That evening, Marcus drove to a quiet park on the edge of town, where Evelyn had requested to meet. Sitting alone on a bench beneath a flickering street lamp was an elderly woman clutching a brown leather bag tightly to her chest. Her gray hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her sharp eyes scanned the area cautiously before settling on Marcus. "You're Captain Johnson?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, taking a seat beside her. "Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I know it takes courage to come forward." Evelyn hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows. "Courage isn't the right word," she admitted softly. "I'm terrified. But I've kept quiet for too long, and it's time someone did something about this mess." For the next hour, Evelyn poured out years' worth of secrets. She revealed that she had once worked as a secretary at the Ridgewood Police Department during Sheriff Griggs's early days in office. Over time, she noticed irregularities, missing funds, altered reports, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. At first, she convinced herself it was nothing serious, just minor misconduct. But as the years passed, the corruption grew bolder, spreading like poison through the ranks. "I started keeping notes," Evelyn confessed, pulling a worn notebook from her bag. Its pages were filled with scribbles, dates, and names. "I didn't know what else to do. I figured someday someone might care enough to listen." Marcus flipped through the notebook, his heart racing as he realized its significance. It contained detailed accounts of suspicious activities involving not only Sheriff Griggs, but also several deputies, including Cole and Miller. There were entries about cash payments exchanged hands, late-night meetings in secluded locations, and threats made against anyone who dared question authority. "This is incredible," Marcus said, looking up at Evelyn. "Do you realize how valuable this information is?" Evelyn nodded grimly. "I know, but I'm scared, Captain. If they find out I gave this to you—" "They won't," Marcus assured her firmly. "We'll protect you. You have my word." With Evelyn's notebook in hand, Marcus returned to the command center where the team eagerly pored over its contents. Combined with the surveillance footage and other evidence, they now had a comprehensive picture of the corruption gripping Ridgewood PD. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, but they still needed hard proof to take down the entire operation. Over the next few days, Marcus and his team worked tirelessly, setting up covert operations to catch the rogue officers in the act. One night they planted tiny GPS trackers on patrol cars linked to suspected deputies. Another day they staked out a local bar known as a hangout spot for off-duty cops, recording conversations between officers discussing stolen goods and payouts. Each new discovery added fuel to their case, strengthening their resolve to see justice served. But the closer they got to exposing the truth, the more dangerous things became. Marcus began noticing subtle signs that someone was watching him. His hotel room felt tampered with when he returned from meetings. Items moved slightly, out of place. A car followed him home late one night, its headlights glaring in his rearview mirror until he lost it in a maze of side streets. Even the friendly cashier at the gas station stopped making small talk, avoiding eye contact whenever Marcus came in. Despite the growing risks, Marcus refused to back down. He reminded himself why he had joined the FBI in the first place: to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And in Ridgewood there were plenty of people living in fear, silenced by intimidation and violence. Every time doubt crept into his mind, he thought of Evelyn's bravery and the countless others who relied on him to make things right. One afternoon, while reviewing financial records obtained through a court order, Rachel stumbled upon something shocking. Several deputies, including Cole and Miller, had recently deposited large sums of money into their bank accounts, all in cash. The deposits matched the amounts stolen during the recent bank robberies almost perfectly. "We've got them," Rachel exclaimed, showing Marcus the documents. "This is concrete proof of their involvement." Marcus allowed himself a rare smile. "It's not enough to convict everyone yet, but it's a start. Now we need to tighten the net." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place thanks to a tip from an unexpected source. Late one evening, Marcus received a call from a young man claiming to be the son of one of the deputies implicated in the scandal. The caller sounded desperate, explaining that his father had confided in him about a planned meeting later that week. According to the deputy, all the key players would gather at an old barn outside of town to divide the spoils from their latest heist. "This is our chance," Marcus told the team after hanging up. "We hit them hard, catch them red-handed, and shut this whole thing down once and for all." The team sprang into action, devising a meticulous plan for the raid. They coordinated with state troopers and federal agents, ensuring maximum manpower without tipping off the suspects. Surveillance drones were deployed to monitor the barn, confirming that the meeting was indeed happening as scheduled. By dawn, everything was in place. As Marcus prepared for the operation, he felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: nervousness, excitement, and a deep sense of purpose. This was it, the moment he had been working toward since arriving in Ridgewood. Failure wasn't an option. When the sun rose over the horizon, casting golden light across the countryside, Marcus led the charge toward the barn. Armed with warrants and reinforced by state troopers, the team surrounded the property, cutting off any possible escape routes. Inside, the deputies sat around a table littered with bags of cash and stolen goods, oblivious to the storm about to descend upon them. "Federal agents!" Marcus shouted as he kicked open the door, his gun drawn. "Hands where we can see them." The scene unfolded in slow motion. Shock registered on the faces of the deputies as they scrambled to comply, dropping weapons and raising their hands. Among them was Deputy Cole, his usual bravado replaced by pure panic. Sheriff Griggs, who had been overseeing the division of loot, stared at Marcus with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You think this changes anything?" Griggs snarled as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You'll never win." Marcus stepped closer, locking eyes with the defeated sheriff. "Maybe not today," he replied calmly, "but it's a start." As the deputies were hauled away, Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift slightly. Justice had been served, for now. But he knew the fight against corruption was far from over. For every Ridgewood PD exposed, there were countless others lurking in the shadows waiting to be uncovered, and Marcus vowed to keep shining a light wherever darkness tried to hide. The raid on the barn was a whirlwind of chaos and adrenaline. As Marcus stood in the center of the scene, surrounded by handcuffed deputies and piles of stolen goods, he felt a mix of triumph and disbelief. The operation had gone off without a hitch. Every suspect was detained, and the evidence was undeniable. But as the dust settled, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning. Sheriff Dan Griggs, now sitting on the dirt floor, with his hands cuffed behind his back, glared at Marcus with pure venom in his eyes. "You think you've won?" he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "This town will never forgive you for this." Marcus knelt down to meet Griggs's gaze, his expression calm but resolute. "It's not about forgiveness," he replied, evenly. "It's about accountability. You've been running this department like your own personal empire, Sheriff. And now it's over." Griggs let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You don't understand anything, do you? This town doesn't care about justice. They care about power, who has it, who controls it, and you're just another outsider trying to play hero." Though Marcus didn't respond, the sheriff's words lingered in his mind. He knew there was truth to them. Corruption thrived when people were too afraid or apathetic to stand up against it. But Marcus also knew that change started small, with one brave act, one fearless voice. And today he had taken a step toward breaking the cycle. As federal agents and state troopers began processing the suspects, Marcus turned his attention to the confiscated items. Stacks of cash, jewelry, electronics, and other valuables lay scattered across the barn, their origins traceable to recent robberies. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of the web of criminal activity, orchestrated by Ridgewood PD. It was overwhelming, yet satisfying to see the proof laid bare. Deputy Cole, still fuming from his arrest, refused to cooperate during questioning. Seated at a makeshift table inside a mobile command unit, he slouched in his chair, glaring at Marcus through narrowed eyes. "You got nothing on me," he growled. "I'm not saying a word." Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You don't have to say a thing," he said coolly. "We already know everything. Your bank records, security footage, witness testimonies, it all points to you. Denying it isn't going to help." Cole's face flushed red with anger, but he remained silent. Across the room, Deputy Frank Miller, a man whose name had appeared repeatedly in Marcus's investigation, was far less defiant. Pale and visibly shaken, Miller broke down under questioning, confessing to his involvement in the robberies and implicating several others, including Griggs. "I didn't want any part of it," Miller stammered, tears streaming down his face. "They threatened me, said I'd regret it if I didn't go along with their plans. I didn't know what else to do." Marcus listened intently, jotting down notes as Miller recounted details of the scheme. According to him, the operation had been masterminded by Griggs himself, who used his authority to recruit officers willing to participate, or intimidated those who weren't. The stolen goods were sold to black market buyers, with profits divided among the conspirators. It was a well-oiled machine, run with precision and ruthlessness. By the time the interrogations wrapped up, the case against Ridgewood PD was airtight. Dozens of charges were filed, ranging from theft and conspiracy to obstruction of justice. News of the arrest spread quickly, shocking the small town and drawing national attention. Reporters descended upon Ridgewood, eager to cover the scandal. For a community long accustomed to silence, the sudden spotlight was both jarring and cathartic. In the days following the raid, Marcus found himself reflecting on the broader implications of what had happened. While the immediate threat was neutralized, he knew that dismantling corruption required more than arrests. It demanded systemic change, new leadership, transparency, and trust between law enforcement and the community they served. To address these issues, Marcus organized a town hall meeting, inviting residents to share their thoughts and concerns. At first, turnout was sparse. Many locals were hesitant to speak publicly, fearing retaliation or judgment. But as the evening progressed, voices began to emerge, tentative at first, then growing stronger. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the retired secretary, who had risked her safety to provide crucial evidence, stepped forward to address the crowd. Her frail frame belied the strength in her voice as she spoke. "For years, we've lived in fear of speaking out," she said, her words carrying weight. "But staying silent only made things worse. Today, we have an opportunity to rebuild, to create something better. Let's not waste it." Her speech resonated deeply with the audience, sparking a wave of support for reform. People shared stories of harassment, intimidation, and abuse at the hands of Ridgewood PD. Others expressed gratitude for Marcus's efforts, crediting him with giving them hope for a brighter future. By the end of the meeting, there was a palpable sense of unity, a collective determination to heal and move forward. Marcus watched silently from the sidelines, moved by the courage of the townspeople. He realized that his role wasn't just about catching criminals. It was about empowering communities to stand up for themselves. It was a lesson he would carry with him long after leaving Ridgewood. Meanwhile, the fallout from the scandal continued to unfold. State officials launched an independent review of Ridgewood PD, pledging to root out any remaining corruption and implement stricter oversight measures. Temporary leadership was appointed to oversee the transition, ensuring that the department operated fairly until permanent replacements could be hired. Back in Washington, D.C., Marcus received commendations for his bravery and dedication to justice. His superiors praised him for handling such a volatile situation with professionalism and integrity. But despite the accolades, Marcus remained humble, knowing that true success wasn't measured in awards, but in lives improved. One afternoon, as he packed up his belongings to return home, Evelyn stopped by the hotel to thank him personally. She handed him a small envelope containing a handwritten note. "You've given us a second chance," she wrote. "Please don't forget about us once you leave." Marcus promised her he wouldn't. As he drove away from Ridgewood, the sun setting behind him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle against corruption was far from over, but every victory mattered. And in Ridgewood, he had proven that, even in the darkest places, light could shine through. if someone was brave enough to ignite it. Weeks turned into months, and the once quiet town of Ridgewood, Alabama became a symbol of both shame and hope. The scandal that had rocked its police department dominated headlines across the nation, sparking debates about systemic corruption, racial bias, and accountability in law enforcement. For Marcus Johnson, the case was far more than another notch on his belt. It was a turning point, not just for him personally, but also for the community he had fought so hard to protect. Trial of Sheriff Dan Griggs and his deputies began in early spring, drawing widespread attention. Courtrooms were packed with reporters, activists, and curious citizens eager to witness justice being served. Testimonies from whistleblowers like Evelyn Carter and Deputy Frank Miller painted a damning picture of a department steeped in greed and abuse of power. Financial records, surveillance footage, and physical evidence corroborated their stories, leaving little room for doubt. Griggs, ever defiant, continued to deny all charges, blaming everything on misunderstandings and overzealous federal agents, but his defense crumbled under cross-examination when confronted with irrefutable proof of his involvement. Deputy Cole, who initially refused to cooperate, eventually agreed to testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His chilling account of how Griggs manipulated and intimidated officers into participating in criminal activities left jurors visibly shaken. By the time closing arguments concluded, there was no question about the outcome. One by one, the defendants were found guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy, theft, and obstruction of justice. Griggs received the harshest punishment, a lengthy prison term that ensured he would never hold public office again. Other deputies faced varying sentences depending on their level of involvement. The verdict brought a mix of relief and vindication to the townspeople, many of whom had endured years of fear and oppression. For Marcus, watching the gavel fall was bittersweet. He felt proud of what he and his team had accomplished, but he couldn't ignore the lingering scars left behind by the corruption. Families had been torn apart, trust had been shattered, and lives had been forever changed. As much as he wanted to celebrate the victory, Marcus knew the real work was only beginning. In the aftermath of the trial, Ridgewood embarked on a journey of healing and rebuilding. With guidance from state officials and independent oversight committees, the town worked tirelessly to reform its police department. New leadership was appointed, prioritizing transparency, integrity, and community engagement. Officers underwent rigorous background checks and ethics training before being sworn in. Policies were rewritten to ensure accountability and prevent future abuses of power. Residents played an active role in shaping these changes, attending town hall meetings and voicing their concerns. Many expressed gratitude for Marcus's efforts, crediting him with giving them the courage to demand better. "You showed us that we're stronger together," said one local business owner during a public forum. "We won't let this happen again." Evelyn Carter, whose bravery had been instrumental in exposing the truth, became a local hero. She used her newfound platform to advocate for education and awareness programs aimed at combating racism and corruption. Her story inspired others to speak up, creating a ripple effect of change throughout the region. Even those who had once dismissed her as just an old woman now respected her wisdom and resilience. As for Marcus, the experience left an indelible mark on him. Though he returned to Washington, D.C. to resume his duties with the FBI, part of his heart remained in Ridgewood. He often thought about the people he'd met, their struggles, their triumphs, and their unwavering determination to rise above adversity. It reminded him why he had chosen this line of work in the first place: to make a difference no matter how daunting the challenge. One evening, while reviewing case files in his office, Marcus received a package from Ridgewood. Inside was a framed photograph taken during the town hall meeting. In it, he stood alongside Evelyn and other residents, smiling despite the weight of the past. A handwritten note accompanied the photo. "Thank you for showing us that justice is possible. We'll keep fighting because of you." Marcus placed the frame prominently on his desk, where it served as a daily reminder of the impact one person could have. He realized that while the fight against corruption was ongoing, victories, like Ridgewood, proved that progress was possible. Each arrest, each conviction, and each act of courage added momentum to a larger movement, one that sought to dismantle systems of oppression and build something fairer, kinder, and more just. Months later, Marcus found himself reflecting on the lessons he'd learned from the case. Corruption thrived in environments where accountability was absent, where fear silenced dissenting voices, and where privilege shielded wrongdoers from consequences. But it also revealed humanity's capacity for resilience and redemption. People like Evelyn, who risked everything to do what was right, reminded him that even in the darkest times, there was always light. He carried these insights with him as he tackled new cases, each presenting its own unique challenges. Whether investigating organized crime rings or rooting out fraud within government agencies, Marcus approached every assignment with the same resolve he'd shown in Ridgewood. He understood that justice wasn't just about catching bad guys. It was about empowering good people to reclaim their voices and their futures. On rare occasions, Marcus revisited Ridgewood, checking in on the progress being made. The town bore little resemblance to the broken place he'd first encountered. Streets were cleaner, businesses were thriving, and smiles replaced wary glances. Most importantly, residents spoke openly about their hopes and dreams, unafraid of retaliation or judgment. It was proof that recovery was possible, even after unimaginable betrayal. During one visit, Marcus attended a ceremony honoring local leaders who had championed reform efforts. As he accepted an award for his contributions, he addressed the crowd with heartfelt sincerity. "This isn't my victory," he said, scanning the sea of faces before him. "It belongs to all of you, to everyone who refused to stay silent, who stood up and said, 'Enough is enough.' You are the true heroes here." Applause erupted, echoing through the auditorium. Tears welled up in some eyes, while others nodded in agreement. Marcus stepped back, humbled by the moment. He knew he'd never forget the lessons Ridgewood had taught him, or the people who had touched his life along the way. As Marcus drove away from Ridgewood for the final time, he glanced in the rearview mirror at the fading outline of the town. The road ahead stretched endlessly, filled with unknown challenges and opportunities. But he felt ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that even in the toughest battles, courage and integrity could prevail. Justice wasn't perfect, and neither was the world, but Marcus believed that every step forward mattered. And as long as there were men and women willing to fight for what was right, there was hope for a brighter tomorrow. With that thought, he pressed the accelerator, heading toward his next mission and the next chapter in his journey.